Welcome to the North Star podcast. Join Claire Daniels and Pete Mills as we talk about defining your purpose and finding your own North Star. We'll be talking about inspiring stories, career highlights, and celebrating Northern businesses. Thank you for being part of our journey. We hope you enjoy listening. Hello everybody and welcome back to your latest episode of the North Star podcast. I'm Claire.
I'm Pete.
And today we're delighted to announce that we're joined by a very special guest. So Sarah, please introduce yourself and tell our listeners a little bit more about you.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having me. My name's Sarah Foster. I'm the Managing Director of an environmental compliance consultancy and produce a compliance scheme. And I'm an avid writer. So in 2020, I published my first book.
Amazing, yes, which we have here. For those who are watching this, available on YouTube, you can see us holding the book up. But yeah, it's a pleasure to have you here today, Sarah.
Absolute pleasure.
And we've been talking already, kind of before going live, about all the different topics we could dive into and unpack. And you know, we would love to dive deeper into that sustainability piece. But I think we'll kind of pick that up later on, potentially in a follow-up episode. But it would be great to just understand a little bit more, maybe just tell us a bit about your career journey to start with, and then hopefully we can dive into some of the great stuff you've been doing at Comply Direct and, what led you to write the book and everything else. But yeah, kind of take us back and take us through that journey of your career.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I'm a sort of advocate of confidence really, and people bringing out the best version of themselves, which is what led me to write the book. So I've taken quite an unconventional path, if you like, to becoming the MD of, and it is a large business. We employ 40 people. We look after the legal and voluntary environmental impacts of around about 1,700 businesses, and turnover in excess of 30 million. So it's a reasonable sized business. I didn't go via university. I took a sort of non-traditional route. I returned to education later in life. So my journey really has always been about trying new things, proving myself. My background is very much commercial, so sales and marketing based, and I've had the pleasure of working in lots of different sectors, including telecommunications, advertising, sport and hospitality, and for the last sort of 12 years, environment and the energy sector, which is really where I found my passion, if you like.
Amazing.
That's
and
amazing,
everything this podcast is about finding your purpose, and we really like to delve into those non-conformative routes as to how to get to where you are today. And so if you say that the environmental side is your passion, how did you find out that was what you were passionate about, and what kind of led you into it?
I think just by trying lots of things. So I was always sort of open to new opportunities and working with different styles of people and different types of manager. I've been very lucky over the years that I've had some really strong mentors who've maybe teased that out of me a little bit as well. And I think just by undertaking new experiences and trying things that are on the edge of your comfort zone, often, regularly, and making that a habit, you do expose yourself to new experiences, which helps you understand where your passions lie.
Well, what would be like one of those examples, Sarah? How would that come about in terms of, you talk about mentors, about a positive impact. Is there something in your mind where you knew that was like a real change in who you were professionally?
Gosh, that's
tough questions.
Tough question, yeah. I think, if I relate that to my Comply Direct journey, when I started, we were a lot smaller, so we were 10 people, 300 or so customers, and from day one, I was given a lot of autonomy, and I was trusted, and by nature, I'm quite a loyal person, so I placed a lot of value on that, and that brought out the best in me, but it also enabled me to bring out the best in others around me by paying it forward and allowing that. So I think, in terms of finding your passion and finding your purpose, you need to be given enough autonomy to make some decisions and to do things the way that you want to do them. So it's not so much about, the objective that you've got to hit within your career or your job role. It's more you're given free rein as to how you would go about that.
Yeah, that's and I have a really, just listening to you there, question. So when you came into that business and you said you were given a lot of autonomy, what do you think, you know, the person that empowered you to do that, what did he see in you to be able to go, do you know what, I think Sarah's got it covered?
I think, well, we'd known each other for a little while.
Yeah.
We met actually at an event where I was a speaker and I was talking about energy management software, and he came over and introduced himself afterwards. But I think that dynamic worked because he'd been doing, as every sort of founder, owner does in the early years, many different jobs and wearing many different hats. And I think it was advantageous for him to trust me because he had way too much on his plate and he needed to run the business, you know, and develop the strategy and make sure that as we were growing, we could sustain that growth and we had the processes in place and add to the team. So I think he just trusted me to look after customers. So my biggest value or behaviour type that is sort of synonymous with me is I will always follow through on something I commit to. If I can't, because the circumstances beyond my control, you know, we live in a topsy-turvy world and sometimes, you know, you can't fulfil your obligations, but I will always sort of explain the reasons why that is and try and find a better way. So I think he saw that in me. I think he saw that I would follow through on commitments for customers, and that builds trust with them, and you know, we were able to grow the business then.
So we were talking about leadership, weren't we, before we started this? So I guess then in you he saw that early leader and being able to trust you to take things and follow it through, because that is one of the defining things, isn't it, as a leader, being able, if you're going to commit to something, you deliver it.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, but also, as I mentioned, sort of having the balls to say when things haven't panned out as you expected them to. You know, being honest about that and being honest about your failures, if they are ever failures, because I'm a believer that if you find a better way around it, you know, you've never failed and you've just carried on the journey having learnt along the way.
So what do you think it is that makes a good leader?
I think there are lots of attributes, and I'll plug another book here. There's a book by Paul Hargreaves, who he was one of the first B Corps, which I know we may touch on and talk about. So he's very much an advocate for business for good, and it's the fourth bottom line, the book, and he actually lists 50 attributes that make up a good leader in a business for good. And the ones that resonate most with me are integrity, and that links to kind of honesty, humility. I think there's a lot of sort of masculine energy in traditional leaders, and I think there's a place for that. There's a place for getting down to business and bringing that and being direct, but I also think we need to bring more feminine energies into leadership, which I think humility, being humble, always having a thirst for knowledge and wanting to learn and wanting to improve. I think they're the most important attributes that resonate with me. Yeah,
it's interesting you say that, because I mean, I've been involved in a lot of things over the years around kind of women in business and, you know, female empowerment. And one of the things we looked at was that kind of masculine traits versus feminine traits. And it doesn't mean men versus women. You know, a lot of women can adopt masculine traits. And I think we've seen that over the years of, I need to adopt masculine traits to fit in at the boardroom. But actually you look at certain events in time, like the 2008 crash, and actually if there'd been more women or people with feminine traits in leadership positions at the banks, you know, potentially being more risk averse to certain things, could we have been in a different position? You know, so really do think there's value in diversity, you know, diverse minds and diverse thinking to kind of drive a business forward.
That's interesting. Because I think one of the things I was telling you about it, wasn't I, where so in the businesses I'm involved with, we're pretty lucky in that each one we're at a 50-50 point with male and female, right? But I got called out for saying something like, I don't look at the world like that, and it's like, well, you're speaking from privilege, but what do you get? So on the other end of the, what do you think to that? Like I just look at you two as people who I enjoy working with. We do this together, but I don't think, Claire's a female and she's got these traits. but am I talking from privilege, or is it just, do I need to educate myself? Go on, throw me into the bus.
Do you know what?
Now.
Because I was just listening to our last episode, because we've just shared that one out, and in that we talk about privilege, because that's a really hot topic at the moment. And whether the people that think privilege doesn't exist are the people who are privileged. It tends to be those who are on the other end of it going, well, it's because you're, sat in your ivory tower, and you go, no, I'm not. Everyone's got it the same and got it equal. My husband often challenges me on like, oh, I don't believe there's this inequality or that. I went, you're a white male, you have never been the minority in a situation, you can't comment on it. I do think, I don't agree with trying to just balance a gender thing just to tick a box. I completely believe in having the right person for the job, but who is judging that? Because actually, if you've got a board of white men interviewing, they're probably more likely to have unconscious bias and more likely to prefer other people like them. I really challenge myself on that, and I find myself doing it a lot. And I was interviewing a bunch of people the other day for one of my clients to help them out. And the person I liked the best, I was then talking about this with a member of my team, I was like, I liked her the best, but she was the most like me. So is that right? And you find yourself challenging on these things all the time, going, but or should I like the person that isn't like me and thinks a different way, because that gives them a diverse viewpoint. So I really think for anyone, business owner or leaders or managers, it is about trying to find diversity in thinking more than anything else. And naturally, if you find diverse thinkers, you probably achieve diversity through gender and race and sexuality and all those other things as well.
Just to pick up on that, so what you've just very eloquently demonstrated is your self-awareness of that. So I think understanding privilege or not, or understanding equality, diversity and inclusion or not, comes down to empathy. And I think what you've demonstrated there is you caught yourself liking that person, but you're self-aware enough to recognise I may have something that I need to unpick there. It may have been that she was just the best person on the day, and we can't sort of allow that to go against her just because she was like you. But it's having that empathy to step out of your own set of circumstances and be self-aware enough to call yourself out when you might be having any unconscious bias. And I think that's all any of us can do.
And I think that's a really interesting topic in itself around self-awareness, because there's potentially a piece there that actually masculine versus feminine people maybe less self-aware. It probably is a bit more of a feminine trait because women are more self-critical, so then you become more self-aware. And actually when we're looking at the qualities of good leader, actually self-awareness one of those. And you were just telling us before we started, Sarah, that you get the 360 degree feedback from your team, so I imagine that's quite a big thing to take on, of like, well, what I think I know about myself versus what people then tell me.
And we do all have them, and in our business we do them regularly, and they are completely anonymous. And they're very consistent, so you are asked, if you're filling one out for a manager, what they do well as what they could improve upon. It's not like you're just being bashed around the head with everything that is a development area for you. You actually get that sense of pride in hearing the feedback of the things that you are doing well, because a lot of self-improvement is dialing up the skills that you've already got and doing more of the same on that front, whilst also recognising what you may not be good at. And the solution to that might be that just needs to fall out of your remit, and you need to delegate that to someone else because it doesn't fall naturally within your flow and your skill set. So if you know about that, you can make a change within the business.
That's interesting. What I'm keen, if you're happy to share, what were some of the things that came out for you as you doing well and then not so well?
Yeah, so in terms of doing well, it was always around people feeling safe, that, you know, the business was in good hands. If I set a target for myself, this comes back to following through on promises.
Yeah.
If I set a target, I would always achieve it. People could rely upon, you know, if I said I would help out with something, I would be there.
Yeah.
I would turn up early. I've got that reliability. Some of the things that have been constructive, and I've taken them as constructive, are that I was perhaps a bit intimidating sometimes in my delivery of information. I've also had that I didn't have as much time to just have chit chat, so people have fed back that sometimes I'd just go straight into a meeting and start talking about the purpose that we're there, you know, because I am very sort of, I guess, professional and respectful of everyone's time, and people would appreciate just sometimes having a bit of a natter about what went on at the weekend. So I've been able to evolve my communication style. I think a lot of it has always related to communication style and how I communicate with others. So I now try and listen more, and I do try and ask people, you know, what's going on in their personal lives a little bit, as well as sticking to business matters when we need to.
And do you think that has had a big impact then on your leadership style with being able to get constructive feedback?
100%, yeah, and I couldn't operate without it. It's become, you know, I remember when I first did one of these several years ago, I was nervous about what was going to come back and how I would be judged on that, you know, but it's not the ability or inability to do your job. That's a separate function. It's to do with your behaviours and how you're going about your job and can you improve. So now I look forward to it and I welcome. It's not always easy to read things that if you've thought you were good at them, you're not performing at, but it's what's really rewarding is being able to digest it and do something about it, you know, and actually make a change, and then for someone to say, you know, you did really well at that next time.
Yeah, I would love to do one of them, and I feel like I just need my business to get a bit bigger, because with maybe at the size I could figure out whose answer was whose or something like that. Not that I'd be like trying to, but it may be aware, you know.
Instinctive human behaviour is to try and
you're like, oh, well, I know that was that person because that's how they would write. But, you know, I'm pleased you've shared that, because even you telling me, I'm like, I wonder if people would think that about me, because I probably go straight in, and I know my team have made like jokey comments about like, right, well, Claire's just now coming in to just get on with it, and so I'm the same with the chit chat. So I think anything you might say then resonates with others as well. And Pete, what do you think about the 360? Would you ever do that?
I'm worried now. Like, I'm probably the end of the starting a meeting, and I have this joke. Well, as you know, with Claire always introducing, because I'm like Columbo. Basically, you'll only get that if you grew up in the 80s. The detective that takes a long time to get to the answer, but he's always at the answer at the end, and that's the key thing. But no, I think I've seen it going on in Slingshot, where we've been introducing that type of feedback, and obviously I play an important role, but I'm part of a management team, so there's a number of people, with David obviously leading that business every day. So it's been interesting to see that feedback and how they're implementing it. And I think it's massive, isn't it? It's incredibly constructive to get that level of feedback.
And it's powerful as a leader to show others that you are not infallible. Yeah. I think it's powerful to give people permission to not always get it right, and to make mistakes sometimes, and to not always bring your best self, because we're human beings, we're not human doings. I
love that, absolutely. And I think, you know, from my perspective, on the humility point, I'm interested that you both think that's a feminine trait. I really try and work hard at humility, because I just think it's something that at the end of the day we're all here for a limited amount of time, and if we can't treat each other and accept mistakes, and we all make mistakes, don't we? But I think humility is a major thing as a leader, for sure.
Maybe you're more tuned into your feminine traits.
Yeah, I think you are. You know, knowing you, it's not saying you know anything, but it's just different characteristic traits. And you're not one of these macho. No. You know, I'm just going to go in and own the place and do this. Don't care who I hurt, what anyone thinks of me. You know,
and I've seen it from other perspectives as well. And obviously, I think that comes from probably I go back to the fish and chip shop story all the time, don't I? But obviously, my mum was a major force in that in our business growing up. And then I think going into the world of work at my early 20s after law school and everything, where I went into an autocratic structure, and I really didn't like people being rude. It was a point of like, there's just no need for it. And actually, people that I saw in positions there as leaders, because of time served rather than as being there because they are good people leaders. And I think that's where a lot of my impact came from. And then obviously being part of a journey where it's exactly how I don't want to do that now. So it's interesting.
Yeah. Something I wanted to pick up on is a lot of what we've spoken about over previous episodes links back to entrepreneurship. I mean, Pete, you're absolutely an entrepreneur, founded several businesses, been involved in them. I own my own business, but I didn't set it up. I didn't go through that, journey I had tried once before. But then, I think there's so much narrative about that. Like, so many people, they want to run their own business or whatever. But here we are, it's nice having another angle of like a really successful business person, but you didn't start the business you're in, but you're still capable to totally steer the business in a certain direction and, be a pivotal role as part of that. And I'm kind of interested.
And being so young as well.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, to be leading genuinely, like what we meet as people, don't we? And I think you're almost like the types of founders I meet, where you've built something, and in a way you have, haven't you? I mean. Yeah,
and I see that very much as as the managing director, I am the custodian of the business, and I say this openly to the team. It's my job to sort of look after everything, and that's from every viewpoint. So that's from the viewpoint of our team first and foremost, and people that work at Comply Direct, our customers, our partners, suppliers, shareholders, anyone that we interact with. I'm the sort of custodian to make sure that everything is as it should be, and I don't sort of underestimate the amount of responsibility that comes with. I think it's a really privileged position to be in, and I think I can do that better having started in a more junior position in the business and proved myself, because I earned the trust and the respect.
And I don't know, whether how you'll feel about answering this, because obviously you have your own bosses and stuff, but do you have any motivation to want to start your own business? I'm keen in a minute to get into the book, and you've gone off and done your own things in those ways, but having been in that senior leadership position and seeing how to run a business and played a role in every part, do you have any desire to want to start a business of your own? Not in the short term, no. I mean, never say never. I have been self-employed in my years before joining Comply Direct. I successfully worked for myself, so was a business owner really. Because even as a sole trader, you're sort of bringing in revenue and doing everything that you do within a business. But I think I'm really happy having been part of the journey for 8 years with my position within the business, and I'm really passionate about everything Comply Direct does and all the things that we live and breathe, because I've been a part of that journey. But who knows what the future holds. And the book, really, I mean, there is a side business because I needed to set a limited company up to handle sales of the book, so that it could be done in a proper way. So I do have a small business called Attitude Academy that has its own website, which is all about the book and the things that are in there, with the blessing of my shareholders and co-directors. So I do have that, but I see that very much more as a passion, and it's almost like a hobby.
Amazing. It doesn't, it's funny, isn't it? Because I think one of the things that, without going too deep on it, because this could be an episode in itself, where you've risen up through the career ladder but done different things at different times, different people, but you are actually in quite an entrepreneurial position now, and you've got there, you've clearly had an eye on the prize at some point, to be there. And one of the things that I talk about a lot is, I know, like, setting these things up that we're doing now, we've been at it 18 months and we've raised lots of money and we're building stuff and we're building teams, but there's points where for example, in sales, you might have heard the term pioneer salesperson that can do this is so exciting, it's new, and but where does that person then drop off? Because actually you're maturing and it's a business that you just need a process, it just needs to be done.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, isn't it, how you view that. I think you're incredibly entrepreneurial by where you are in your thinking, especially we've had private conversations about the potential market and where it could go and everything. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, and I think that links into my loyalty and desire to see this through with Comply Direct, because I've only been in situ as managing director for a year, so I'm fledgling MD really. I've been on the board for since 2018, for a few years longer, but our vision of a better, fairer, sustainable world for all, and going through the B Corp journey, which is going to provide us with a framework to evidence to the world that we take people and planet as seriously as profit in our decision making. I'm personally invested in that. And I think success and even wealth and reward, it's not monetary, all the time. Yes, we need to sustain ourselves and we need to be compensated for the value that we add, but what I've got right now allows me to make my impact on the world in my little own way from Skipton. And I place a huge value on that. That's really rewarding.
Amazing.
Yeah. And that, when you said about that, reminded me of something you've said before in one of the podcasts, Pete, is when we've spoken about success, you said nothing makes you feel happier than when you see the amount of acres you've saved from Rainforest Trust, and like playing your part in the bigger picture. And so what's led to this move, strategic direction for Comply Direct to want to go down a route of being a better business?
I think a lot of it has been driven from the team internally. So we employ a lot of graduates. So our workforce in general, I mean, you're saying I'm young, I'm 40 at the time of filming this, and I'm one of the veterans at Comply Direct in terms of age. I'm one of the older amongst us. So we have a very young, ambitious, driven workforce. A lot of them come straight out of the University of Leeds to us, and these things really matter to them. So we've been listening through our recruitment processes really for a number of years to people asking, what are we doing about environmental issues, and what are we doing about governance, and what are we doing about people and workforce, and even supply chain labour standards. So it has really come from the Comply Direct team, and we've operated, I would argue we've operated like a B Corp for many years, and this just allows us to be audited against that and to evidence it to the world with an independent verification that that's how we think.
Yeah. And what actually, for anyone who's not familiar with B Corp, what is it? What does that process look like?
Yeah, so B Corp, I think it actually stands for Benefit Corporation, and it came out of the States. There's about 7,000 B Corps, I think, worldwide. It's very new in the UK. There's a few hundred in the UK, but it's growing all the time. In terms of in Yorkshire, I think there's only less than 10 maybe B Corps. So what B Corp does, I would compare it, for those who are familiar with standards, to standards like BSI. So they have the quality ISO 9001. So it's a framework that you are audited against that tests you in key areas relating to the triple bottom line. So it tests that you, in your decision making and in the way that you run your business, you place an equal value on the planet and people as you do profit. So profit's important. We all need to sustain ourselves, and employees need that. They've got mortgages to pay. But what B Corp does is it evidences that you would never place profit above planetary impact or impact on people, be that your people working with you or your community outside of the business, your customers, your suppliers, and it tests that with a very rigorous assessment, a business impact assessment, and you have to score quite highly to get the B Corp badge.
Amazing.
Are you in? I am. It's something I'm really keen at looking at for Trio, so I'll definitely be picking your brains outside of this to kind of understand the process a little bit more, to try get on board with it, for sure. So I think we've teetered on sustainability, the environment and the planet. And, you know, for those who've listened to the podcast from the start, they'll know that it's an area that Pete and I are both individually passionate about as well. And so I definitely think we should dive into that as a separate episode, if you're happy to do that, Sarah.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I think we should kind of cut that one off here and say thank you all so much for listening, and please join us in our next episode, where we're going to be really diving into that sustainability and environmental piece in a lot more detail. So thank you for listening, and we hope to see you in our next one.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the North Star podcast. To find out more about us and find more episodes, please visit thenorthstarpodcast.co.uk. Thank you for listening.